Well, good morning, Fremont.Church. It's so good to be with you all this morning. So grateful that you're coming to us virtually from wherever you are. And I know there's others joining in from across the country and the world, those who've been a part of FCC in the past and are joining us here. And it's so beautiful to see how God is using this time to bring us together in new and creative ways. How are you? How are you doing this morning? I was so long to see your faces. I wish I was looking at all of your faces this morning, but I am so grateful for the technology that allows us to gather, even in times like this morning. And I am absolutely thrilled to be a part of this new series that we're starting. We started last week called Be Brave. And Pastor Roger got us started last week with his very inspiring and hope-filled message. He shared with us that what we're going to be doing is highlighting 6 different nonprofits in our community that we will be inviting you in to be engaged in practical ways during this season that we find ourselves, this collective experience that we are having together, this moment in history. We want to invite you to engage in some really practical and powerful ways. And Pastor Roger started by asking a crucial question, and the question is this: how are we going to emerge from this stronger than ever? How are we going to emerge from this stronger than ever? We have to start by acknowledging that this that we long to emerge from is hard. I've never experienced anything like this, and I know that that's very much what a lot of you are experiencing. This is brand new territory for most everyone I know. And so we're wrestling with this, and we have to get really honest about how hard this is. I know that many of our prayers during this season include lament, prayers of lament, if we're honest, where we're crying out, "How long, O Lord?" like the psalmist in Psalm 13. "How long, O Lord? How long? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" This is the cry of many hearts in this season. And if you're not in a time of personal lament, we are most certainly in a time of collective lament with so much devastation that's sweeping across our community and our country and our world. And so we have this cry that comes up from our hearts, this lament. I know for me, this new normal, this past week has required another level of endurance. I know there's some days where I feel like I am thriving and I've got this new rhythm, and other days where I am trying to make it to bedtime. There's a little bit of both. But we hold this grief and this lament and this disappointment in our own lives, and as we have empathy for what's happening in the lives of people all across the world. But we also, in the other arm, we hold on to hope. We hold on to the hope that we also see in that same psalm of lament, in that psalm, chapter 13, at the very end. He says, but I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord. We hold on to the lament and we hold on to the hope because God's love is truer than true. He is closer than ever because we are living in the kingdom of Jesus. And the reality is that he is with us through every moment, sustaining us, carrying us until the end, even in death. And he continues to invite us to bring his kingdom of heaven to earth, to embody his love and his power, his joy and his empathy, his hope and his comforting compassion, even in this. But it starts with receiving what we need from him, doesn't it? Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3-5. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ. This week I began to imagine myself receiving this comfort and compassion. This is our God, the Father of compassion, the God of all comfort, and he offers it to us. This is not a word that's not an intellectual word. This is a heart invitation for you to receive into the deepest part of your being the comfort and the compassion of our God. And it's from this place of comfort that we can then extend that comfort to others. And this is the rhythm, the unforced rhythms of grace that Eugene Peterson talks about. This is the rhythm of being a follower of Jesus, that everything that we receive from him, it overflows out of our lives to the people in our sphere of influence. All of his comfort and his compassion, we receive it and we live in it and we soak in it, and then it becomes embodied in our lives, metabolized into the lives of those in our community. I think that what I've seen in this season, though, is what I've seen called compassion fatigue. Have you heard of compassion fatigue? Anyone relate to this right now? Compassion fatigue is defined as an indifference to charitable appeals on behalf of those who are suffering, and it's experienced as a result of the frequency and the number of appeals. We're bombarded with the need. We're bombarded with the brokenness, and so we become fatigued, and we become stunted. The temptation when we're overwhelmed with our own pain and the pain of the world is to then just stop, is to numb out, to disengage emotionally. Anyone else tempted to disengage emotionally, to exit, to run, to numb yourself, to use whatever you can to get away from all of the need that surrounds you, all of your own need and the needs of others? I think that's what's happening. We feel this idea. I think we struggle with this idea that because we can't fix everything, we don't want to try to do anything. The problem is so big that we can't make a dent. So why try? And I think that's one of the enemy's biggest lies is because you can't do everything, don't do anything. You can't make a difference. That is a lie from the pit of hell, because the King Jesus lives inside of you by his Spirit, and he wants to empower you to actually make a profound impact in the lives of people around you. This morning, I want to invite you to simply consider taking the next step in compassion, whatever that looks like for you today. In her beautiful, enchanting book, An Altar in the World, Barbara Brown Taylor asks the question, what is saving your life right now? I like this question. I think it's a really good one to consider these days. What is saving your life right now as we put our faith into practice in new and creative ways in this season? For me, I want to share with you three of the ways, three of the things that are saving my life right now. The first thing that's saving my life right now is a daily walk. Anyone else? I got to get out of my head and into my body, breathe fresh air, put my feet on the ground, and experience the bigness of the world outside of my home. That daily walk is saving my life. And the second practice that is saving my life is in that daily walk, and that is my gratitude practice, where I am on a beauty hunt every day. Where can I see the goodness, the loveliness of God coming to me? And it's coming to me through the beautiful smell of the flowers in my neighbor's yard. When I walk by, and the honeysuckle and the roses, it's wafting. The smell of grass that when it's being watered reminds me of running through the sprinklers as a child. The goodness of God flowing to me through the birds and the birds' songs. His beauty, and then that awakens my heart to worship. When we see and experience beauty, it awakens us to worship. And that is so beautiful and can help us endure this season right now. The third thing that is saving my life right now, I have to tell you, is being engaged in a mission that is grander than myself. Putting my hand and my heart, all that I am, to a mission that is greater than me. A mission that I believe is transforming the fabric of the Bay Area, one child, one family at a time. And that's the mission of Foster the Bay. I'm so excited to share again with you about this beautiful movement that I get to be a part of, and that we at FCC are partnering in together. I want to unpack this for you, and then I want to give you some really practical ways that you can get engaged. Living with mission and vision during this season can be part of what sustains you through this unprecedented season in which we find ourselves. I heard a pastor this week encourage us to sow seeds into what we anticipate for the future. We are waiting for this to lift, and that is very true, and it's the reality. We're waiting for this to end so we can do the things that we love to do, so we can work again, so we can go out to dinner again, so we can look at each other in the grocery store full-faced and not half-masked. We're waiting for those moments together. And while we wait, we don't just waste the waiting. We are sowing seeds that will help us absolutely build the vision that God has for our future. So what seeds are you sowing in this season? I want to read to you some of the words that Jesus says in Matthew 25 that will shape our series over the next few weeks together. And these words of Jesus have shaped my life personally, possibly more than any others of his. Jesus is describing in Matthew 25 the ultimate kingdom when everything culminates at the end of time. And he explains how he will separate people based on the way that they cared for the least of these, the sheep and the goats, the ones that followed him and the ones that did not follow him. In verse 34 of Matthew 25, it says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' The disciples didn't recall having done any of these things. So they asked Jesus, when did we do all these things for you? Verse 40, Jesus says, "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" You did for me, Jesus says. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to be sharing practical ways for you to follow this invitation of Jesus into the lives of the least of these. Jesus' words emphasize what we see all through the Old Testament and into the New Testament. And that is one of the truest expressions of faith that is alive is the way that we engage with the most vulnerable among us. That is a reflection of our true life with God. We see that again and again. And it's fitting to start our series this morning with an invitation into the lives of children in foster care and their families. Since the impact of kids not being welcomed into families long term has devastating consequences in our communities that actually end up with the outcomes of many of the things that we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. Caring for children who do not have parents who can care for them, whether it's for a short period of time or forever, is part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. It's a biblical mandate. It's a biblical mandate for us to engage with children who do not have families to care for them. It's not a biblical mandate for some people. This is a biblical mandate for all of us. So there is some way for you to engage with children who come from hard places. Psalm 82, 3-4 says, "Defend the defenseless. Defend the defenseless, the fatherless and the forgotten, the disenfranchised and the destitute. Your duty is to deliver the poor and the powerless. Liberate them from the grasp of the wicked." And we see the wickedness in the life of a child in foster care in such profound ways. Sam Whitaker, a pastor in Gilroy at South Valley Community Church, he's on our foster debate team, and he's put these beautiful slides together that really show what is happening in the life of a foster child. We see, first of all the impact of sin in this first slide. All the impact of sin. There's an individual impact of sin. And that individual, but we know that sin does not just impact the individual. We know that also sin impacts not just the individual, but it leads to familial. It leads to the familial brokenness. So we have individual brokenness. Can you put that slide up there, Matt, if you have it? The individual brokenness, the familiar. We talk about generational curse, right? The generational curse. You struggle with the same thing your daddy did. It's this generational. And then we come to the next level, which is societal brokenness. So society, things that are supposed to be set up to actually prevent pain, actually create more pain. And then this actually leads to the next level, which is systemic brokenness. And in the life of a foster child, which would be the next slide, in the life of a foster child, all of these systems of brokenness converge when this child is removed from their home due to abuse and neglect. And you can imagine at that moment of convergence of all these levels of brokenness, when that moment converges, the kind of outcomes that can bloom from the life of a child in foster care are devastating. And those include incredibly painful things like the fact that 60% of child sex trafficking victims rescued in 2012 were children who had spent time in foster care. Foster care is directly related to the human trafficking problem. 70% of inmates in the California prison system spent time in foster care. And then these next few statistics show what happens if a child is never welcomed into a loving home. 71% of girls who age out of the foster care system, never having been welcomed into a home, 71% will be pregnant by the age of 21. 50% will develop an addiction to a controlled substance. 50% will be unemployed by the age of 24. 33% will become homeless. You see how all of these, the convergence of all this systemic brokenness, comes together in the life of a child in foster care. But here's the thing. This is where the Church of Jesus Christ, as we gather together, followers of Jesus, can actually cut this off at the pass. We can actually go upstream because we believe that the best way to see a transformed Bay Area tomorrow is to care for a vulnerable child today. We can prevent these incredible outcomes from happening by welcoming these children as beloved sons and daughters into our homes, into our churches, into our families, and shift the outcome by the power of the Spirit. It's been said that when you have a biological child, you are co-creating with God. When you engage with children in foster care, you get to be a part of co-redeeming with God. Co-redeeming with God. My brothers and sisters, there's a crisis in our Bay Area communities with more children entering foster care than there are families to welcome them. In fact, in Alameda County, 50% of the kids who enter into care, there's not enough homes for them. And so they're sent hours away to other counties because there's a lack of homes for them here. That is not okay. We are sending our most vulnerable neighbors into other counties and neighborhoods because we are saying, we just don't have room. It's too hard. Some of you might be aware that during this coronavirus pandemic and the shelter-in-place mandate, the children and youth are more at risk than ever to experience abuse and neglect. As we are acutely aware of our own personal experiences and challenges during this time with so much anxiety rising and fear, do you know who really understands an unexpected change in routine, a sudden loss of control, and chronic feelings of fear and loneliness? That is the normal experience for a child in foster care. This that we're living in is giving us a new empathy for all kinds of vulnerable people that live with this kind of mentality throughout their lifetimes. This is their normal experience. We also know that domestic violence historically skyrockets during times of crisis like this. So for many children, school is their only safe place. It's their only safe place, and they're stuck at home 24/7. It's really unthinkable to imagine what can be happening behind closed doors right now. And I know that's hard to hear and hard to say, but we need to remember and realize and become aware of what might be happening so that we as the people of Jesus can be ready. Because what's going to happen, experts are predicting that when the shelter-in-place mandate lifts, when these kids are back out in the open, when they're back in school, there's going to be an influx of kids entering into care. See, what's happening now is no teachers, no coaches, no therapists, no doctors are seeing these kids to make reports of potential abuse or neglect. There's no eyes on them. So calls to the abuse hotline is down 60%. That's not because abuse is down 60%. You know, if you're home with your kids, you know how hard it is. And it's even more hard, it's more challenging for those who are fighting with addiction and mental illness. We need to be ready. We need to be ready as the people of God for when these children enter into the system. I know that it's hard to hear this, and this is where that compassion of God, we receive his compassion and we extend it to others. And you know, Jesus had such a special place in his heart for kids. He had such a special place in his heart for kids. In Matthew 18, verses 1 through 5, it says, "At that time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, 'Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, 'Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me.'" What fitting words from the mouth of Jesus as we consider welcoming vulnerable children in foster care into our lives. Whoever welcomes a little child in my name welcomes me. Whoever does for the least of these does to me. These children, Jesus is saying, it's as if they are him. We are turning him away. As many of you know, our personal family journey has been shaped by foster care and adoption. Welcoming our youngest child in our late 40s into our home has literally become one of the greatest joys of our whole lives. He is Isaac, our son of laughter, our little joy boy. But I have to tell you that at the same time, foster care and adoption has been the greatest joy of our life. Foster care has also been the greatest pain of our life. It's led to marital conflict and stress, familial, incredible conflict, pain, chaos, burnout. We don't walk into these stories and expect that it's not going to impact our lives. But we are invited as followers of Jesus to take up our cross. We follow Jesus. The symbol of our faith is a cross, an instrument of torture that Jesus absolutely created into an image of mercy and hope and love. But the pathway was death. And we are invited to lose our life that we might find it. And this requires a level of bravery that is only supernaturally given. Foster care is an invitation into chaos. It's a call to step right into the brokenness. It's amazing, it's scary, it's beautiful. I believe that sometimes when we think about being brave, it's really important for us to remember that this only comes from the Spirit. I love Jesus' words in John chapter 16, verse 33. I'm hearing it quoted a lot these days. He says, "These things I have spoken to you so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world." Jesus says, take courage. And I like this translation because of the picture it conjures up that he's offering it to you. He's offering you courage. It's in him, it's flowing from him, and he desires to give it to you. But you have to take it and receive it, right? The Greek word translated courage has this idea that God's desire is to bolster you up. Anyone need to be bolstered up right now? Bolster you up, empowering you with a bold inner attitude. Jesus is infusing you with his strength so that you can live in this unflinching, bold courage because of the inner confidence that the Spirit produces in you. It's this idea of being emboldened from within to literally radiate with warm confidence. This is what Jesus wants to give you when he says, take courage. Take courage. Here, have this. It's with this brave courage that we step into the stories of people who are in the greatest need in our communities. As some of you know, Foster the Bay is a coalition of churches that together are committed to ending this foster care crisis in the Bay Area by providing a loving home for every child entering foster care. Not just through foster parents, but through a whole church community that comes around that foster family, specifically with 4 support friends committed to taking that journey with the foster family so that foster parents can do this longer and better. We've seen the transformative effect of doing life in community. We are invited to carry one another's burdens. And so you don't do this alone. You do this in the context of community. Fremont.Church is part of this coalition. So FCC, let's get ready to welcome these kids, these vulnerable kids. What is the next step? I would love to see some of you take the next step to become a licensed foster parent. I believe there's people in this church who have the heart, the space, the spiritual maturity, the bandwidth to welcome children in foster care. I know it's a big ask, but I just don't want you to assume that this is not for you. We can't assume that anything that God invites us into is not from him. We have to wrestle with him, ask him, what is my part in this? I'll never forget a story I heard at the Christian Alliance for Orphans conference. This man speaking told a story of when he had been visiting a country in Africa. And he had been in the back of a church gathering in a large hut. And it was just in the heart of the AIDS epidemic. And children were being orphaned every day. This man described the pastor at the front bringing up a child, standing this child before the congregation and saying, "Is there anyone who can take this child? He's lost both his parents this week." And in this context, the women were on one side of the hut and the men were on the other side. And this man telling the story describes of how he witnessed a wife and a husband look at each other and with body language and no verbal expression, body language, facial expression, basically agreed with each other, we'll take him. And the man spoke up and said, we'll take him. Now you have to understand, this man already had, I think, 6 kids. This family had 6 kids living in a small hut. We'll take him. I know that if I had a child with me that needed a home, and I said, here's this 5-year-old little boy who needs a family, I know so many of you who would be the first ones to say, he can come home with me. He can come home with me right now. I don't want you to think that just because he's not standing here right now with me, he is not standing somewhere in your community, needing your love and your home. He very much is. She very much is. I realize that not everyone can be a foster parent. So like I mentioned, there's another way for you to welcome a little child, and that is by becoming a support friend, committing yourself to wrapping around a foster family here at FCC or one in a neighboring community here to provide practical and tangible and emotional support. Foster parenting is hard. 60% of foster parents quit after the first year because it's so hard. But we've seen that number change. That percentage changes when foster families are supported and enwrapped with care and love. Tangible, physical support. Additionally, there's other ways that you can engage right now. I would love to invite you into consistent intercessory prayer for kids in foster care and all of the people that are engaged in their lives. If you'd like to join us in that intercessory prayer, we have a 31-day prayer guide, and I can get that to you if you let us know. Also, Benji and Jessica Craig are the advocates for Foster the Bay here at FCC, and they also are a great resource to you for anything that you would need and you wanting to take the next steps. Additionally, due to this pandemic, we're working closely with Help One Child and the recruiter in Alameda County, and we've curated a list of things that kids need right now to keep them entertained and busy during this crazy time. A lot of foster parents don't have the means to get extra stuff to engage their children. And so that's one practical way you can help. And that, again, is on top of what you're already giving regularly to your local church. We know that we need to be faithfully giving to our local churches right now. If you can give above and beyond, maybe just one item on that list. If everyone just gave one item on that list, it would be emptied. That's another way you can help. In order to do any of these things, what I want to invite you to, and this is such a great time to do this, is a virtual interest meeting. I know there's so many of you who have wanted to come to an interest meeting in the past. In fact, we were supposed to have one yesterday here at FCC, but obviously we're not gathering, so that didn't happen. So this is an amazing opportunity for you to actually come to an interest meeting and hear what it would be like to take the next step in any of these ways. Again, when Jesus invites us into his kingdom work, and I've said this again and I will say it again and again, he simply invites us to take the next step. We don't have to do everything now. We don't fast forward into the future and say, well, I can't do that. You have the grace to do what God's asking you to do today. And whatever his Spirit is urging inside of you, I encourage you to say the next yes. Just the next yes. And this interest meeting, the way that you can get any of this information is going to the website fosterthebay.org, and you can drop down to the wish list, you can drop down to RSVP to this interest meeting, and continue this conversation of how you can engage. Such a great time to learn how you can do more. I just want to encourage you to listen to that whisper. We spent all those weeks together learning how to listen to the gentle whisper of the Spirit. And the invitation is to listen to his whisper and to say yes, to go where he asks us to go, to be filled, to take the compassion, the comfort, the bravery, the courage that he offers us, and to embody those into the lives of the people that most need it in our communities. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to share my heart with you this morning. Jesus, I thank you so much for every person that's in earshot of my voice this morning. I pray, God, that you would break our heart with what breaks yours, and that you would give us the courage to resist the urge to numb and to exit and to forget, but to allow ourselves to feel what you feel for the brokenness of this world, and to be moved like Jesus with compassion, to reach out and to touch and to invite and to love and to comfort. God, give everyone that hears this prayer the courage to follow your Spirit wherever he leads, even in this. And God, I pray for a special grace to receive your comfort in this season, and a special grace to extend your comfort in this season. We are desperate for you. We are desperate for you. And we believe that we will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. We give ourselves to you today. In Jesus' name, amen.